But as Caleb kind of referenced today in our reading, we're going to talk about fighting. We're going to talk about, this past 3 weeks, this week being the fourth, has been kind of this elaboration of each of us speakers being able to say, what do we feel like we want to speak about outside of a regular series, right? And I spent a lot of time thinking about it. There was one thing I really wanted to talk about, but as more and more I thought about it, I just wanted to talk about it. I don't know if it actually showed any use. But there came this big inclination to talk about conflict, and I couldn't shake it. Maybe it's a reflection on situations that I'm going through. Maybe it's reflections on situations I've heard of. Or maybe it's a reflection of something that's going on in their church. So I'm just inferring and be able to be sensitive to. But I just couldn't shake this idea of conflict. Because I have a big statement that any two people, any three people, any community that doesn't have conflict is not a good community. If you're a relationship and there is no fighting, then I would say that is a superficial relationship. The whole point of relationship isn't to learn to not fight, it's to learn how to fight well. How do we call each other out well? How do I display my emotions well? But that's still conflict. It's learning how to fight, not to avoid the fight. My old job, I was a safety manager. And the way we were a small company, around 30 people, and the way we worked, our CEO sat amongst us in cubicles. So we were our hierarchy did not exist in practice. So I was a safety manager working under my project manager. And so oftentimes him and I would be at heads in terms of authority, because when it came to the safety of people in my area, I was higher than him. But when it came to the progress of our project, he was higher than me. And we had conflict. Natural, reoccurring conflict. Because oftentimes he would want to do things to push our project forward. And my job was to say, should we do it that way? Is there a better way? Are there rules and regulations around this? And I remember this one instance where him and I, we had this loading bay area. We sat back there probably about 3 hours, arguing, fighting, talking it out. And our relationship was even really weird because him and I both went to the same church. We were on the same worship team. He was the lead elder, and I was of some non-important position in that church. But we worked together. Our lives were integrated. And we spent 3 hours fighting. And out of that, I think good things came out of it. We went to authority. We learned how to respect each other's boundaries. But I did learn a lesson. I knew he would always be someone to push back against the authority above him. And I just happened to be in this weird duality. So when I left that company, I made sure to put the head safety guy over my area. Because then there wasn't this duality of authority, and they would have to have equal conversations. Just because him and I fought it out and agreed doesn't mean I didn't learn a lesson from that confrontation. But I have this big question that I want to answer. And that question comes down to, how should Christians handle conflict? How should Christians handle disagreement? How should Christians handle discipline? These strong words that we feel like we should avoid sometimes because they are hard, but they are necessary because our whole religion is a relationship. Our whole religion is about community. Our whole gospel is about this desire for our God to restore the relationship we once had with him. To answer that question, how should we handle conflict? I have, our standard map. We're going to talk about private things, we're going to talk about public things, and we're going to talk about the promise that God leads us to inside of this. Now, I want to begin with private. That text in Matthew begins in a private confrontation. Our conflicts are typically private in nature. I have a disagreement with someone about something. Someone does something to hurt me. A misunderstanding. Oftentimes, we're not talking about a big blow up in the public sphere. We're talking about, hey, I've asked you to put the toilet seat down. You aren't putting the toilet seat down and I feel disrespected. Right? I ascribe most misdeeds, and we've talked about this kind of before, as there's two types of issues. There's the intentional issues, and when we look at them, we're like, you did this on purpose to hurt me. And then there's the unintentional things. You did this and it ended up hurting me. The intentional is easy to work through. It's related and it's real, cognizant sin. The unintentional is so much harder. Because when something bad happens to me and I'm hurt, I want it to be intentional because it's easier to deal with. But something we've talked about before, we can't ascribe to malice what most likely be is ignorance. Someone might just not know. Someone is unaware. The expectation was never communicated. And this unintentional issue likely just needs information. Someone does something. Let me inform you. Hey, when you did this, this hurt me. Give that person the opportunity to respond. Jesus tells us in Matthew 18, the very first thing he says, if your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. And if he listens to you, you've gained your brother. But if he does not listen, then we take two or more along with us, that every charge might be established by the evidence of two or three witnesses. And then if he refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. And if he refuses to listen to the church, let him be to you as a Gentile and a tax collector. Jesus shows us that discipline is to escalate only as necessary, but it's supposed to begin as a one-on-one confrontation of relationship and community, such that I am hurt, I go to the person that hurt me and said, you hurt me, and give them the opportunity to apologize, give them the opportunity to, from my perspective, redeem themselves to me, give them the opportunity to say, hey, I didn't know, thank you for letting me know. Every relationship will have conflict, and every relationship will have a path to resolution. I think one of the things that comes into this point, the fact that Jesus says the first thing that we're supposed to do is go one-on-one and confront the person that hurt us, is that one-on-one relationships are valuable. They are worth something. They are honorable. In Matthew 5, Jesus says, you've heard it said that from those of old, you shall not murder, and whoever murders, they'll be liable to judgment. And I say to you that everyone who's just angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. Whoever insults his brother will be liable to counsel. And whoever says, you fool, will be liable to the hell of fire. So if you are offering your gift there at the altar, and remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go. First be reconciled to your brother, and then come and offer your gift. Come to terms quickly with your accuser while you're going to court, lest let me find my place. Your accuser hand you over to the judge, and the judge will never let you out until you pay the last penny. One-on-one relationships are so valuable. Jesus says, don't go into the worship service if you know someone has something against you. Don't be here. If I go outside and I know my neighbor's hurt by me, I shouldn't be here right now. I shouldn't make the sacrifice and offer up what I have here in this church service until I go outside and try to reconcile with the person that I hurt. Our relationship with others impacts our relationship with God. The whole point of the parable that Caleb read to us this morning. Remember, a guy is forgiven of a great debt, and he does not forget the debt, the small debt of those who hurt him. And the guy, the king says, man, your debt was forgiven, it was pointlessly. To some extent, my ability to forgive others shows the sincerity of my response to the gospel. Right? If I can't forgive others, that means in my heart, I haven't fully accepted the depth of how much God has forgiven me for. That's how valuable those one-on-one confrontations are. It is the first step. If I hurt somebody, I want them to let me know. And if someone hurt me, I need to go have a talk with them. However, sometimes those relationships can't be handled privately. Someone's pride gets in the way. Maybe the interaction, the hurt was so intense that I don't feel comfortable going privately. Then we bring along witnesses. I think the Bible's definition of what these witnesses are, they're those who saw the source of the conflict. Someone who can validate and say, yes, this actually happened. Those who saw the proof or evidence and are convinced that it did happen. And these are important. In the biblical nature, paper trails, digital, scientific evidence that we have today don't exist. I couldn't go get a DNA test to find out who robbed my house. I had to go off the words of those around me and who I saw with my own eyes, right? Today, it's a little bit different. If someone sends a poor text message, I can say, hey, you sent this, right? Someone puts a weird post on Facebook and I can go, wow, that was really weird. Something going on, can you talk to me about it? See, this internet age means that anything we do is most likely recorded in some way, somehow, and is never, ever removed. But back in Jesus' day, that wasn't the case. Things were forgotten. Things weren't seen. It was hard to truly prove your case. So witnesses really brought this step into saying, hey, this actually happened. You were actually wronged. And I want to go over this real quick. Witnesses are also important. I kind of hinted that sometimes hurts are so extreme that it's not emotionally feasible to go confront that person one-on-one. I don't think Jesus gave us this definite list of this is the way it has to happen. I think Jesus gave us a list of this is the way it generally should happen. Witnesses also provide that validation in those times of extreme hurt, that you can get a support network underneath you and go handle that situation not alone, but in a community. So I would say there are situations where that one-on-one confrontation can be skipped. And I don't want to say those words explicitly just because a lot of those words are heavy. But when I'm saying situations where you can't confront the person that hurt you one-on-one, I suspect we all have this type of situation in our head. And then Jesus shows that that small community does not work. Then we go to the greater community. We say, hey, we came to you with witnesses. There are people here who validate this experience happened. You hurt me. I've tried to confront you. I've tried to show you the error of your ways, to redeem our relationship. But now I have to take it to the greater. I have to shame you in public because you won't respond in private. So we go to the church. And the church stands up and says, wow, we didn't know this thing happened. Now we do. We confront this person. You have the opportunity to change or leave. Become a part of us and redeem this relationship, or become as if you were a Gentile and tax collector. All the agency goes onto the person being accused, right? It's their choice to correct themselves or to stay inside of their ways. And Jesus says, if they do not change, treat them as if they are an unbeliever. They are a Gentile and a tax collector. And that is harsh. However, I do want to say that the Jews were called to reach Gentiles and tax collectors. So what Jesus says is you treat them as an unbeliever. In our words, we'd say, hey, you treat them, let's say they were a spiritual parent and they weren't able to remedy their ways. Now we treat them and we start the cycle over with them and we start discipling them once again. We treat them as if an unbeliever. So it means we evangelize with them. We intend to redeem their relationship with God through His power and His miracle inside of us. And then we disciple them. And that's a private interaction. I think that's really a private interaction. Jesus isn't talking about something that everyone saw. He's talking about a one-on-one hurt. And we escalate that up through the chain of hierarchy in terms of community to try to remedy that hurt. But then we have these public instances where someone comes in here. What's a really absurd one? Someone comes into this room and flashes all of us. That is a very public instance. This isn't a one-on-one hurt. Everyone knew this. Everyone saw this. right? If we see something going on, the Bible said, if we see something as a community going on and don't say anything, the Bible suggests we become accomplices to it. If we don't call each other out, we become guilty by association, by, what's the sin of, I lost it here, the sin of not doing anything. We basically, what?
Lethargy.
Omission, yeah. We're guilty by association through this like sin of omission almost. Paul addresses this in 1 Corinthians 5 when talking to the church about a man who is sleeping with his father's wife, right? That's kind of the whole context you need to know about this passage. Paul is writing to them. He says, wow, I know of this. You know of this. What are you doing? So 1 Corinthians 5 verse 3, Paul writes to them and says, for though I am absent in body, I am present in spirit, and as if I was present, I have already pronounced judgment on the one who did such a thing. When you are assembled in the name of the Lord Jesus, and my spirit is present with the power of the Lord Jesus Christ, you are to deliver this man to Satan for the destruction of the flesh, so that his spirit may be saved in the day of the Lord. This guy was sleeping with his father's wife. The Bible uses that terminology. I kind of have two options here. He was either sleeping with his mom or his mother-in-law, his stepmom according to our culture. Either way, both of those situations sound really terrible, and the church knew about it. And Paul confronted them before, and this was him saying, hey, you are now accomplices in this interaction because you haven't disciplined this man. Using God's Spirit, the church is to lead the church into a change and increased character. So what the world does outside isn't truly important. If this sin happened outside in the world, they would consider it immoral. How much more inside of our own walls? And we're supposed to operate a little bit different. We are holy because God is holy. Paul continues in verse 12 and says, for what have I to do with judging outsiders? Is it not those inside the church whom you are to judge? God judges those outside. Purge the evil person from among you. There is this element, there's this fear, there's this cultural taboo. Judge me. Only God can judge me, right? No, Paul is saying judge each other in the church. For we have all sinned. But we are all called into God's character. This is supposed to be the place of conviction. This is supposed to be the place for forgiveness. This is supposed to be the place of growth. What this is not supposed to be is the place of condemnation. That's the difference. We are to judge without condemning. How else can I call out a brother, and how else can I push someone towards change character without judging that their action was wrong? At the simplest thing, I have to make a judgment. What I'm saying inside of Christian character is I can't judge them. I can't condemn them. Wow, you lied to me. You're a liar. And you will never not be that way. That's condemnation. What I'm supposed to say is, wow, you lied to me. That hurt me. How can we remedy this relationship so you don't lie again and I don't get hurt again so we can grow together? Paul says to the church, he says, put this man outside for the Satan to take him for the destruction of his flesh. That is very parallel to Jesus saying, treat him as a Gentile and tax collector. If we look at all of these things, they are supposed to be temporary. They are supposed to lead to redemption. They are supposed to lead to a promise of a restored relationship. These disciplinary texts can be scary, and I understand that often they are used in the church as a point of manipulation and a point of authoritarianism. Do what I say, or I will discipline you according to the Bible and cast you out of this community. I've been a part of those. I know people in our community that have been a part of those. The whole point of this disciplinary process is for restored relationship. The idea is to not get to the point that we have to cast you out of our community. The idea is that if we cast you out of our community, hopefully it's temporary and you come back in one day. Jesus said in Matthew 18, returning back to our main text, he says, beginning in verse 17. And if he, the person you've accused and kicked out, treating as a Gentile and a tax collector, refuse to listen even to the church, let him be to you as a Gentile and a tax collector. And truly I say to you, whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. And again I say to you, if two of you agree on earth about anything they ask, it will be done for them by my Father in heaven. For if a relationship is not restored, then we're supposed to treat a person as an unbeliever. Kind of spoke over this. What do we do with unbelievers? We show them the love of Jesus and point them towards a restored relationship with God. Jesus brings into this concept of restored relationship 2 or 3. And it's not some special formula. I'm guilty of calling it a special formula. Oh, if at least 2 of us together, Jesus is here, right? That is completely out of context of what Jesus brought that statement up. He says, in the disciplinary process, if 2 or 3 of you agree, then I am there amongst you, and whatever you pray about will come true. It represents a community. It's saying that I am not judging others. I am allowing myself to be accountable to my greater community as much as they are allowing themselves to be accountable to me. In community is where we have the best relationship with God. And in community is where we are able to discern God's will the best. And in community, we are able to have our best affirmation and our best accountability. Someone tells me, you are forgiven, here's where you need to improve. I'm able to go to tell someone else, here's where you are forgiven, and here's where you need to improve. That community relationship. And everything is supposed to be the promise of going back into community. I want to bring up another example, that 1 Corinthians guy, that guy who slept with his father's wife. We think Paul wrote about him in 2 Corinthians. I want to put an asterisk here. We are divided in like the academic community on what Paul's character was in this. But I'm going to lean on tradition right now and say the early church fathers fully believe that 2 Corinthians, the statement we're about to read, is about the same guy that slept with his father's wife. So I'm reading that with that asterisk. It might not be true, but let's for a second assume that it is. In 2 Corinthians 2, 5 through 11, Paul says, for if anyone has caused pain, and he has caused it not to me, but in some measure, not to put it too severely, to all of you. This guy didn't hurt me. He hurt you. For such a one, this punishment by the majority is enough, so you should rather turn to forgive and comfort him, or he may be overwhelmed by excessive sorrow. So I beg you to reaffirm your love for him, for this is why I wrote, that I might test you and know whether you are obedient in everything. Anyone whom you forgive, I will also forgive. Indeed, what I have forgiven, if I have forgiven anything, has been for your sake in the presence of Christ, so that we would not be outwitted by Satan, for that we are not ignorant of his designs. Paul shows us, I want to go into a second. This whole statement, it really is independent on who Paul is talking about. This whole statement, I could believe the early church fathers and say, wow, this is about that weird sexually immoral guy. But Paul's saying, hey, somebody was disciplined in your church. Somebody hurt you. It really doesn't matter who. But now forgive them and love them again, so that they aren't hurt more than they need to be. So they aren't overwhelmed by their sin. So if this was that guy who slept with his father's wife, bring him back in community. If this was another guy, this was another person, bring them back in community. Either way, they should be forgiven and redeemed and restored into this relationship that we have as a church. So whoever this statement really is about, it doesn't really matter. Paul shows us that change should be met with forgiveness and restoration. The discipline process isn't about just my safety. The discipline process is about the change of the person that I'm calling out. It is about restoring and growing the character of my neighbor, my brother, my sister, the fellow believer in my midst. And that is the same thing as the message that the gospel gives us. The church disciplinary process is a parallel, it's a window, it's a vision into what the gospel provides. God says, here is a relationship that is broken. God says, you as man have hurt me. Here's the way towards restoration. It isn't, wow, you've hurt me, go away, leave my sight. It is, you have hurt me, here's your choice, restoration or your own pride. Here is the accountability. And then all the agency is on me to respond to that. When we call someone out, the agency is on them to respond to that. So how do we answer our question? How should Christians handle conflict? I would say the summary is with accountability, with conviction, and with the intention of forgiveness and restoration. Any fights between us should be handled with this intention of forgiveness and restoration. We should not let petty arguments be the dividing factor between our community. This does not imply that restoration will happen. It implies that restoration should. There are some relationships that are just so damaged that, and from a human perspective, they shouldn't continue. But the idea is that we try. The idea is we walk in there with that intention. Because we are supposed to seek relationship at all costs. Now, the world does not like this accountability. Right now, our culture is filled with this statement of, you hurt me, leave my sight and never come back. You've done something stupid in your past, I found it, let me bring it up and judge you for it. The words that we use is cancel culture. And that sucks. Because that is providing a barrier and not a boundary. It's not saying, hey, I need change. If you show proof of change, I'll accept you back in. It's, wow, you did this one thing. Crunch, conviction, condemnation. That's the end of relationship for us. And that's not the gospel. Because if that was the gospel, then there'd be no hope for restoration for us. God had every right to say, wow, you sinned. That's it. We're done. Christians, though, will also cast off discipline, the effort of restoration, and accountability for their own safety or their own perception of safety. They don't like feeling accountable. I don't like feeling called out. Change is hard. Conviction is hard. So I will often avoid it for my own perceived safety. But God says accountability, community, and relationship is the goal, and where relationships exist, conflict exists. Forgiveness and restoration. Where's Ben and Grace, if you want to come up. Forgiveness and restoration is our currency in this church. Now, I say this church, I do mean our church, but I mean the church. Relationship and restoration and forgiveness is our currency. And without it, as the parable of the servant of the rich master says, if without forgiveness, we reject God's message of forgiveness to us. I cannot shirk the accountability that comes with God's promise and gospel. And I also cannot shirk the responsibility of rebuking and encouraging the growth of my fellow believer. Both exist. Community exists, cyclical, and accountability is a back and forth. We're going to enter into a point of communion, and I want you to think as we sing, and as we enter into remembering Jesus' sacrifice, about the forgiveness that we've received, that we are called to forgive others out of, about the accountability that my sin convicted my heart on, that God provides a restoration from. So we're going to sing. We're going to take communion. I'll be back up in a minute. Would you stand with us?